Hello, and welcome to the Digital Workspace Works podcast. I'm Ryan Purvis, your host, supported by our producer Heather Bicknell. In this series, you'll hear stories and opinions from experts in the field, stories from the front lines, the problems they face and how they solved them, the areas they focused on from technology, people and processes, to the approaches they took that will help you to get to the grips with the digital workspace inner workings. Welcome, Mitch, to the Digital Workspace Works podcast. Do you want to introduce yourself, please?
Absolutely. Thank you for having me, Ryan. So my name's Mitch. I guess in terms of my background, somewhat of a varied background, a little bit of a non-linear path. I started off when I was a child as a racing driver into go-karting, moving through the ranks into Formula 3, ended up being a British champion, but I didn't come from a particularly well-off background, so that was always a sponsored drive. And when 2008 happened, the financial crisis, the first thing they pulled was sponsoring fancy cars. So that dream came to a crashing end, pun intended. Moved into the event management space, and I think at the age of 16, bought my first business, ultimately scaled up to about 30 individuals in a full-blown sort of catch me if you can episode where a bunch of them were adults and I had to almost conceal how young I actually was together with my best friend, but nonetheless scaled it up. My first exit when we were 20. And I guess because I was the weirdo mathematician at school, was told I had to go and be a banker. So that's what I ended up doing, and ended up working at the nation's favorites of, I say that in quotes, with Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan and Barclays. But all jokes aside, actually, if it's possible, quite enjoyed my stint, 7-8 year stint in investment banking. I think primarily I was in the solutions group, meaning I had a kind of black ops mandate to really engage in any sort of asset class across $20-30 billion financing deals in global jurisdiction, and really got my weeds and my head into the weeds of how companies behave and how sovereigns and institutions and how it's all very, very different. Left that well in 2015 to co-found my first tech startup, I guess second business, because the grass is greener outside of the corporate lens. And what's the name? So yes, co-found my first tech startup in the retail tech space. Went very, very well. Went to 5 rounds of funding, got to 300,000 MAU, had a nice hockey stick growth curve. And the whole business was essentially helping the high street get more customers on demand and then give back the analytics for those customers. Ultimately, sort of digitize the high street play, ultimately being like a Google pay-per-click with the offline space. And then COVID came along, and having the best week of revenue going into the pandemic, we were gearing up to exit and went from our best week of revenue to 0 in 27 minutes, which was pretty challenging. As a marketplace business, consumers locked at home, retailers and high street closed down. And, with all these sort of negative revolutions, I think the bad makes way for the good. Started doing a lot of consulting work, became a CRO at Olio, which is a food waste company, trying to solve the problem of food waste at scale. And we sort of helped them close like a 40 million Series B, ended up going to another startup that I co-founded in the interactive entertainment space, left that behind us and sort of stood down as a COO back in January. And now I am a COO at a machine learning computer vision company, specializing in applying computer vision to retail at scale.
Wow.
Sorry, that was a bit of a long answer. I realize as I'm hearing myself, like I need to get some more succinct with the non-linear part.
As a friend of mine would say, is you bull cool shit. That's what you do.
Bull cool shit. I'm glad I can use some French in this. I can use some French today.
Yeah, he's actually a very interesting character, and he has a better way with accents than I do. But he makes it sound really like a John Travolta kind of one-liner, or even a Schwarzenegger kind of one-liner. One that stands the test of time. Great. I mean, it's quite funny because I think we might have just missed each other at JP Morgan.
Yeah.
Because I think I started there 2012, and you left to go to Barclays around then. Not that we were really in the same space at all. I was in the back, with the hamsters, making sure the wheels were turning from a technology point of view. But I mean, so I'm curious. I mean, so you said mathematician. So what made you start a business when you were so young? When most people your age, like I was your age, I was building my own stuff, but I was also playing sport and socializing and all that kind of stuff. I mean, what was the drive?
Great question. It's always hard to cast my mind back to the 16-year-old version of me, but I guess, on one hand, it was every single weekend was dominated by racing from the age of 8 till 16, literally to 3 days a week. So I think when that came to a crashing end, there was this void. I just wasn't really sure what to do in that spare time. So I think that was probably one reason. Another one is a little bit of the school I went to that were very proactive in teaching us hustle mentality. It was a very good secondary school, but it was very exactly all around empowering you to kind of think as a bit more of a hustle mechanic, and that no one's entitled and you've got to make your own way. So I think combination of upbringing. Also, my father came from nothing and kind of took himself from almost poverty and that kind of deep poverty to being somewhat well off. So I think it's having that kind of programmed in me, along with the racing background, which I think as a racing driver, you're taught from a very young age, especially in karting. If you spin off, get back on, and every single place, even if you're last and you make up one place, it matters. So I think that kind of drive and push is just instilled from a very young age.
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, I never drove karts, but I played a lot of sport, as I mentioned, and I had a coach. And it's amazing how little things in your sporting stuff teaches you for life. So I used to have a coach who used to say, always recover. No matter what happens, just recover. And if you recover, then don't worry about the mistake, doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And I watch it now with my son. He's 5 and he's turning 6, but he's a big boy. So he gets treated like a 9-year-old. And I see it what I went through as a kid. I was also quite a big kid. He's learning that resilience now, that he has to just figure it out to do something. And I don't think it's something that you can ever necessarily teach somebody without making them struggle.
Correct.
And you've got to step back and let them struggle.
Absolutely. Yeah, look, I to exactly that point, I think no one learned anything from success. People learn from failure, unfortunately. Bad needs to happen to cause change. If everything goes dandy and rosy, you're not faced with adversity and you're not faced to react or to proactive anything. It's just everything's a status quo and fine. It's only in the face of adversity that people are forced to learn and to adapt and change. So exactly, unfortunately, tenacity is born out of failure. And I think that's where starts a really good job in celebrating failure, so long as it's quick and inexpensive. Yeah. So that you can develop something new from that and take those learnings.
No, for sure. For sure. And I mean, the various businesses you've been involved in, I mean, are those businesses that have been something that's resonated with you and I've got to do this, or has it been something that you've kind of brought people together or wangled people together to do something you've wanted to do and it's kind of all joined together? I don't know if you can understand my question, but
I think so. I think I get you. No, I look, I think one thing that's always that I learned coming from maybe like yourself, from the investment banking world or the corporate world, more like into startup land, or at least being a founder, was, making all the money in the world as a 24, 25-year-old. It really taught me, working 20 hours a day, I couldn't spend the money. My friends weren't the same place. I didn't have time to see any of my friends and family. And I just thought that was the status quo. Working was a miserable endeavor. And to be honest, the team I was in, I actually was quite lucky. It was really very different. It wasn't particularly monkey say, monkey do, as some roles can be in the corporate world. It was always very challenging and different. But nevertheless, I think where I'm trying to get to is, when I left that world in 2015 and co-founded my first, tech startup, the first year I had savings, like me and my 2 co-founders, were ultimately best mates from school. And we raised a round of funding, which we put all into our employees, into the product. And our assumption was, we're going to raise another round second year, and then we can start paying ourselves. And in reality, I think that was naive being a naive founder, first-time founder, and it took a lot longer to raise a second round. The point here is that, after my savings kind of dissipated after the first year, in the second year, I was being paid to walk dogs. I was doing delivery orders. I was Airbnb-ing my apartment out, staying at my parents' home, all to make ends meet. And I was happier doing that every single day than I ever was a day in banking. And I wasn't a miserable banker. And that taught me to follow passion and to over-index with passion, and the money will just follow so long as you're happy. So I guess your question in terms of the businesses that I've either founded or been a part of, it's always come from conviction. I can't get out of bed, especially as a founder where generally you're on lower salary, even higher equity. I can't get out of bed and be hyper motivated, and I like to be quite an ambitious person in that respect, unless I really believe in what we're doing and it genuinely resonates. So Nez, the first endeavor, it was my baby. It was all our baby. And it was a pure pursuit of passion. I must be honest, I have never been the one that's created the idea per se. I've often been brought into something. So when you said, is it you kind of stitching people together? I've often been an operator as opposed to, the CEO. It's a COO title. And I love that. I love being the executor and taking the vision or the madness of the CEO and putting it into building blocks. For some reason, that's my jam.
Have you ever read the book Rocket Fuel?
Rocket Fuel.
It's a book.
I don't think so. It's worth
reading. and I'll distill it into the two main things that I got out of it. One is there's two roles in every business. There's the visionary and there's the integrator.
Mm-hmm.
And you're an integrator, it sounds like. Mm-hmm. And I'm very similar. Typically won't come up with the idea, but once you grasp the idea, you'll make it happen. You'll execute it, and you'll bring people together but someone else will do that visionary stuff and whatever. And it makes sense that you kind of have jumped around. When I say jumped around, obviously you spend a lot of time in different things, but your trajectory has changed as things have changed, because it makes sense that that's what would happen. And you've used probably all your knowledge from previous things to fuel the next thing. And you've just found somebody else that's giving you a new thing to be interested in, to go, yeah, okay, that means something to me. Let me do it.
Ultimately, yeah, I think that's a very good way of putting it. And I'm a massive over indexer with momentum, and having just tiny progress week on week, that's something that really fuels me. And into like the integrator side of it, it's I view it very much as a journey. I know when my end goal, or what I want to be doing, is an end goal in life, and I know there's no one way of doing it. It is a number of steps to get there. So my engagements have all 4 or 5 years that I'm in, and it's each engagement has been that huge step for the next platform. And each of the startups I founded, the way they've been founded each time, the backers that have joined us, the investors that have come on board, it's been huge step changes from each one. And I never, as a banker, I thought, and I was in solutions group, so a lot of my work was in derivatives, and it was very, very niche skills. But who on earth is going to want a derivatives expert at the age of 24 that's on a silly salary you can't replicate anywhere else, because that's what IB does. It traps you in with a high salary. Who's going to want my skill set? What have I got that's relevant? I really had a huge amount of an identity crisis, and I know lots of us suffer from it. And in truth, actually, you kind of see with each engagement I've had, been a part of, and as an operator, those experiences as an IB have become very relevant, not from a technical side, but a soft side. Being able to conduct yourself in any meeting and going into the deep end, which I know you had as well, Ryan. But then like my experiences at my first startup at NES, which was helping the high street with a kind of a footfall driving machine on demand. It's totally different to my second startup, which was helping musicians make interactive experiences. Couldn't be a world apart. But that experience from the first startup taught me how to market like a wizard. And I've never been a marketer, never been trained, but it was a marketing biz. We were helping the high street market on algorithmically. So taking all of that piece into Volta was a huge part. And I brought with finance systems and systems architecture and stuff I just didn't think would be portable, but it all is. And every single time in this journey, it's sometimes things feel like they won't get aligned or dot up, but in reality, I find it quite remarkable how much stuff does join up in the long run, and how many things you realize, that had to have happened, or it wouldn't have been this way. And it's quite beautiful. It's beautiful when you see life through that lens.
I think it's a very important lens to have. I think a lot of people get very caught up in their failures. I know someone that she didn't take a job, and the rest of her life is a disaster because she didn't take that one job 5 years ago. And the reality is that by not taking that job, something else happened. And it may not have been a good thing at the time. But in hindsight, if you look now 5 years later or 10 years later, I can't remember when this was, but she's done other things successfully. So, but you got to realize that you had to go backwards to go forward sometimes. And people don't like to, I think we're trained by movies and by TV series and that you always have to be going forwards and upward. It's okay sometimes to know, there's either step up, step in, or step out. That's sort of the three things.
Absolutely. But lateral movement is still progress. So for me, it's so long as you're learning, that will pay dividends at some point. Continually learn, dare to be different, dare to challenge. And as you said, people often very, very, very scared of failure. Rightly so. I'm never sitting going, I can't wait to fail. Don't get me wrong. But I think over the years from moving into so many different sectors, and often having to take a step back and going, okay, in between my first tech startup NES and then into Volta, the interactive experiences one I mentioned, it was during COVID, and I was a CRO for some time at a Series B, Series C company, on a much higher salary with huge promise and huge backers, and consciously made a decision. I love music. It's been a hobby of mine, a passion of mine. I'm going to take a step back to being a founder again, starting from zero and going that whole piece, because I appreciate it. If I need to learn about this space, and it was very, mixed reality, Web3, AR, VR, that was the learning I kind of over-indexed for there in that period during COVID. needed to be done. And I guess I have even a tattoo to that effect, which is it started with the clouds passing. The idea being the clouds will always pass. No matter how cloudy a day is, it will pass. When that sun comes through, it will be very abundantly clear as to why. So yeah, I've almost now got to the point of something bad happened with this failure. I'm like, good. I know in 2 or 3 months or a year or whatever, I will see why that had to happen, and it will be very clear.
Yeah.
I've yet to find it not be a positive example. And there's some stories I can't go into in a podcast format. We can have a drink one day, but certainly an extreme elements of adversity have kind of come through, and it's still proven to be a silver line. It's still proven to be a silver lining into the tunnel.
Yeah, no, I can imagine. I mean, we have that personal conversation. I'll share mine as well. But I can tell you, I can tell you, from a professional point of view, there's been jobs that I've left, which at the time people have said, you're nuts to be going, like this is the thing, and I've gone, it's not my thing. Like I just know this is not going to work for me. And 6 months later, I've done something else, and it's been 3 years of enjoying doing something altruistically more important than what I was doing. And it's looking back and going, actually it was a good decision to do that. And you just got to have that sort of gut feeling or that confidence you're doing the right thing, as much as the willingness to take a chance, I guess.
Absolutely. And yeah, to retort just to that, I had a very similar thing. I stood down as being a full-time COO, ultimately a co-founder of my own business as Volta, that I started in January, and a lot of it was over the way the company's strategic vision was changing was just something I no longer could get out of bed for. I just didn't get it, couldn't wrap my mind around it. It became just, whether right or wrong, it just became so far removed from what I could wrap my mind around as an integrator. The vision became out of scope with what I could even work with, and had to make that difficult decision. Yes, it was tough. Of course it was. It was the baby, I built with a bunch of, ultimately became the CEO's best friend, right? And it's a very difficult time, but now here I am, and ultimately sitting as a COO at an AI company I love, and there's huge progress. I've got other engagements in companies from supporting an NGO at refugees, empowering refugees, to working on a neurodiverse dating app. So it's like I get to now really kind of give back in a way and help.
Well, so all three of those things I wanted to bring up next anyway. So let's talk about the neurodiversity dating app, because that I'm curious about. So what made you get into that? Because I mean, you've been with that a year now, so you've got a bit of time with it. I mean, what started that for you?
Yeah, so again, I guess the title there is a COO. It's a part-time sort of COO mandate. So a lot of my sort of work now is being a sort of new word of fractional. I'm having a number of different engagements, but I was the CEO of that business, I guess the founder at the time, but before it was even incorporated. Ultimately, is neurodiverse himself, had been diagnosed with ADHD, dyslexia, and more recently with minor autism. And to him, it was a breath of fresh air. He kind of felt like, wow, I've always known of it, felt different, and then now understood as to why. And I guess the point of inspiration he had was, there is no safe space in the dating world or even any matchmaking place for the neurodiverse. It's almost a scary place. Where do people who are autistic or dyslexic or whatnot go? People even with extreme OCD have different needs and sets to the mass market. And I think from his perspective, it was the point of, he just wanted something that was inclusive. It didn't have to be serving just a neurodiverse, but just a safe space, doesn't matter what you are. And seemingly, rightly so, we've had huge conversations with sexism, with racism, all the different swings. But in terms of actually neurodiverse, which is another marginalized category of individuals who feel like they aren't, part of whatever you want to call it, society, that was the kind of point of jumping off from. And it really resonates to me. It really, really did, in the sense of, a lot of the engagements I had have had a strong mission behind them. Volta was very much the point we're trying to solve for, was artists do not make enough money. The top 0.1% of artists command 99% of revenues in the industry. It's more acute in music than any other sector on earth. Yeah. COVID just completely wiped off anyone who wasn't Kanye West or Justin Bieber. So that was a huge mission there. Nez was all around helping the high street. It was, with delivery, did not work with the major chains like the McDonald's and whatever of the world. It was, the family run indies, the smaller chains. So, with Mattr, it was a huge part of the mission to re-empower those. I've worked with a lot of neurodiverse previously. I have personally seen and helped and been with those who've suffered from various mental health conditions and disorders. So for me, it was a case of, okay, if I can use my experience again with what I've done a lot of in the past is B2C marketplaces, especially that have a geographic constraint, i.e. people dating will only go a certain distance before it becomes, too long of a trip to go meet someone. So I thought, okay, I've got tons of experience there and have done it successfully multiple times. And I love the mission. Okay, I can be effective here. I can add value, because there's one thing I hate anything that smells of consulting personally, in the sense of I like to be on the inside as opposed to the outside. So for me, it's, can I offer value? Can I actually be useful? And do I believe in the mission? And can I get out of bed for it? And that was it resonated from the get-go. So yeah, I've been alongside Jamie and the founders ever since the start, and I've seen it kind of going from strength to strength. Just helped them close another round of funding. So I guess stay tuned on the progress of the Mattr team.
I think it's such a great idea. I mean, I've got ADHD, probably with some other stuff. My wife definitely says I've got a few other things, and it's
Sorry, I shouldn't laugh. We were all yeah.
No, it doesn't bug me at all. It was one of those things, and I was diagnosed. So I mean, I grew up in a household where no one believed in that stuff. You just have to work hard and be disciplined. That was the answer to everything. And I struggled through varsity. And high school was easy. You just passed, you just had to memorize stuff. But university was obviously not like that. You had to practice. And I didn't have that ability to practice. I started another job, and the job was more interesting because we were building really cool stuff. And you know how your priorities go when you focus on stuff like that. And ironically, my mother-in-law, who now was not my mother-in-law then, but pre-getting married, she used to teach kids with all these disabilities or challenges or whatever it was. And she said to me, like after 1 or 2 nights of drinking, she said, "Have you ever been checked for ADHD or ADD or anything? Because you're pretty high on that spectrum." Like, candidly, it's like, well, no, never. Anyway, it was literally a flick of a switch from, once I started being medicated, I went from failing maths to creamy maths. And it was just that ability to sit down and spend a whole Saturday going through examples because you just couldn't be bothered. Like, I get this concept. I get it. It's easy. Like, why do I need to practice this? This is easy. And then you'd go to the exam and you're like, damn it, I should have practiced this a little bit more. Memorize, because in my university, you weren't allowed to take in any formulas, like a cheat sheet of like all integrations. So you have to memorize everything. But if you don't practice, you don't know how to, you don't use that. Anyway, so long story short, I mean, going to where I am now, and I'm talking to people now in their sort of 40s and 50s that now have been diagnosed with whatever it is, Asperger's, autism, whatever. And it's like this unveiling of a new identity, but also like, for some of them, it's the reason why they haven't been able to do stuff. Like they couldn't understand why. And it's put them into depressions, it's put them into all sorts of situations. And just having a place to talk to, someone to talk to that's also gone through it, or just realize that they're not broken. They just got a different path. So that's why this one jumped out at me as one of the things to chat about.
Just your point about not being broken, I think that's a huge part of it as well, which is people have different things to offer and different strengths. And, poignantly with ADHD, the MI5, for example, Inspire agencies are actively recruiting those with ADHD, improve reaction times, quick thinking, so on and so forth. So exactly, it's just the rebalancing of where one's strengths are as opposed to anything else.
Have you ever read what's called Hunters and Farmers?
No, and now you're testing me with my book knowledge, and you're picking up on the books that I have not read.
It's another good book to read, and basically the guy who writes the book, his premise is that the people that are the neurodivergent, specifically ADHD, they were the hunters in the Neanderthal, the original times, let's call it, and then you had those that were the farmers, and obviously when we went into schooling people, 100 years ago, and there's only started educating people like in the 1920s or 1930s. It were the farmers that set up the education system. So that's why everything is what it is. It's factory mindset. You got to sit still, you got to listen, you got to do these subjects, you have to regurgitate what you know, etc. But the hunters were those people that had to go and get the food. So they had to be hyper aware. They had to be able to focus. They had to be able to go long periods with a lot of change and recognize patterns and all that kind of stuff. And it's a very interesting take on it because it kind of even reconfirms that you're not broken. You just, like in those adventure games where you get points for different capabilities and abilities, you're just one of those, And
Exactly.
So great. And the AI piece, I mean, so that's new. I'm very interested in computer vision. So what's going on?
Might be? I figured you might be. Yeah. So I guess where to start with Edgify. It is indeed my primary engagement. I guess I'll start with a proposition ultimately, which is, so what Edgify is trying to do is to essentially apply computer vision at scale, and specifically within the retail market. So I'll start with kind of that use case, and then it's easier to start with the use case and then kind of broaden from there. But ultimately, with supermarkets, so use case number one, sort of around circa 2013, as you would have seen, a lot of supermarkets brought in self-checkout tills, removing employees from doing the checking out process. And the idea there was, if we can save 20% on employment costs, great. And we might have to forego some revenue because people will do clever things around nicking stuff, whether it's, not scanning items or weighing a banana, taking the barcode and sticking it on something else, you name it. There's some very clever ways people would defraud supermarkets. So much so that it accounts for a $700 billion problem. So 10% of every humongous silent problem. But the idea was, well, if we're saving 20% on labor and we're foregoing 10%, no, we're still better off from a margin perspective. Obviously, as computer vision has been scaling as a concept and has hit the mainstream more and more and more, there's been a number of startups who've changed their attention to trying to use computer vision in supermarkets and in store scenarios. The problem there, though, with computer vision or anything ML is you need training sets, huge data models, which in the context of retail, especially orchestrating it customer data, would mean that the data has to leave a store, go up to some central cloud, do all the training model, and go back down to the store, which that was typically the way, which enterprises not like, because there's a huge privacy concern, GDPR, customer data, you name it. So the early entrants into the market, quasi-competitors, ultimately took a hardware approach and ultimately would put in some server racks, data centers in each store, does a little bit of mining, and off you go. That endeavor is obviously a very expensive one. The hardware endeavor means the total cost of ownership of the solution is very expensive. What Edgify have done very, very cleverly is, or very intelligently rather, is taken a software-first approach and found a way to ultimately integrate to all the existing point-of-sale players in these different retail environments. Ultimately meaning that Edgify is a software layer that sits inside one of these self-checkout tills. The camera that's already in the self-checkout till is all we need. And ultimately what they've created is a system called federated learning or distributed centralized learning on edge devices, such that every single point of sale system does a little bit of the learning, stitches the data together, keeps us data compliant, and off we go. And that has been, a tremendous product decision. That's actually we're, the only ones in market with that solution right now at scale, having the accuracy levels we do. We are at 99. We're actually 100% on the rounding, but we can't quote that. So we're at 99.9999 to 5 decimal points. And ultimately have now seen that kind of escape velocity where we are literally, I guess it's a champagne problem, but a problem nonetheless, firefighting to grow faster in the sense that we have so much client demand. It's just rapidly going and we're having that kind of, huge escape velocity and off we go. I think, really what I'd want to just call out there is, it's the framework that's really of value. This framework of federated learning on edge devices. Right now, the use cases in retail, huge amounts of data, consumer data. It's the highest data sets in pretty much any sector. But what we're spending time on and what we have to field a lot of inbound interest is in healthcare. These are use case X-ray machines. Again, legacy legacy hardware that had a huge capex number over it to replace those systems. So can we apply Edgify to those legacy pieces of expensive hardware? Aviation. The list goes on of the different use cases that our framework can be applied in. So yeah, I personally love it. It hits my retail experiences. I'm an AI enthusiast for many a year.
Yeah.
And yeah.
I must connect you up with a friend of mine in shipping.
Please do. Yeah, that is another.
Because so there's actually a couple, and I mean not nearly obviously as sophisticated as what you guys do with vision, but I have built things where we used edge learning to solve problems and then feed that back. And then we followed an OODA loop principle. So observe, orientate, decide, and act locally, and then they would come centrally. And it was very similar to what we did in shipping. So they'll have to go down the vision route for sure, because it's safety on the vessels. And they'll need to do something that is distributed, because you've got a vessel that, in the middle of the ocean on a satellite uplink where bandwidth is going to be at a premium. And not everyone has bandwidth. Not everyone pays for the satellites. Unless Elon's got satellites over them, I don't know. So I think it'd be interesting just to introduce you to each other. And he's also London-based, so Yeah, I mean, he's the guy that got me out of banking into shipping.
Okay.
And he, when you talk about the sort of crazy CEO, he used to drive me absolutely insane. Because he used to send me these WhatsApps with like all these ideas, and I'd be like, we haven't even built this part yet, and you want to build the rocket ship over there, like just chill, But yeah, it was a good 3 years, a good 3.5 years, because I learned a lot from him. So yeah, I think it'd be a good connection.
We'd love to. We'd love to. Yeah, shipping makes a lot of sense. And, what I didn't really crystallize, obviously, we're currently in retail is, given the system we built, it means that no one has to scan an item ever again. It's barcodeless item recognition, all the suite of loss prevention stuff. So I'm finding it very, very interesting. I think,
I remember when QR codes became fancy, in the sense that, because of COVID, you couldn't have a menu, so you had to scan a QR code. And initially I was like, oh, this is a good idea. And then COVID kind of ended, and then you were still going to the same restaurants, the same place, and they were still saying, oh, you need to scan the QR code. But now it's like, yeah, but there's no why. It's like 5 seconds for this thing to load the menu, and then this menu is this crap thing that I can't even get to. I can't even see what you've got, and like I'm just going to go somewhere else.
It detracts from the experience. I agree.
So
you don't want to be on your phone in a restaurant with a friend or a partner or a family member, right? The point is to get off your phones.
Yeah.
So I'm with you.
And we spent the last couple of years, spent a lot of time in South Africa, and it's the one thing we notice every time we come back to the UK is table service is just not there, and it's like the most important part of your meal. Yes, you can have some restaurants where you'll have a table service, but like we had drinks with some friends the other night, and we were sitting outside, and they're like, we don't serve outside, so you have to order through the app. But then if you want to order food, you have to order from the bar. So it's like, so one person's always running in and out to do orders, and it's just so messy. And table service, I mean, yes, I guess there's a wage thing to it, but as you say, sitting on the phone. And now, I mean, specifically and I'm sure you have with some of your friends, some friends don't like it when you pay for their drinks, or they always want to pick up the bill, and you want to pick the bill. So it becomes a little bit of a whose phone is fastest kind of thing, which distracts from the sort of conversation, and then that opportunity to sneak off and pay the bill, because now it's already done on their phone. So there's this. I mean, it's such stupid things. Like, these are not really problems in life, but the old thing of having of interaction with a human who's going to take the order, chat to you, tell you what's good, etc. You don't have to worry about finding the thing on the menu on your little phone. I mean, I think it's just, and then notification kicks off, and you're like, oh, there's a text message from one of my clients. I got to go. I got to make a phone call. Which has happened a few times too.
Yeah.
As you say, you're disengaged from your devices in those circumstances. So those cameras, I'm curious, because we did something with the biometric thing a couple of years ago. Does the camera have to be a certain spec, like HD camera or anything like that, for it to do the recognition?
30 quid Logitech USB camera.
Well, that would be an HD camera anyway nowadays. That's
pretty
good.
True. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, exactly. You're right. But to be honest, most of the tills and SEOs and POSs we're working with, they already have cameras integrated in there. And to be honest, there's some projects where we're actually using just the CCTV cameras above them. Really, wow, yeah. Our CTO is and the team are wizards. Wizards. Let's call it that. And are very very well respected in the industry. And yeah, we've been battle tested to the nth degree. And as I say, I think some of the people we're working with, like I mentioned, a certain Mattr tech player that tried to do it themselves that couldn't do it, and are now using us in that exact same shop, I think is well in testament to the strength of the product there, really.
No, it sounds amazing. It really does. And I'm curious, has anyone pushed you for the facial recognition piece to happen, for recognizing people and that sort of stuff, or have you stayed away from that?
No, we've stayed away from that, I believe. Ultimately, it's a much more sensitive area of consumer data, right, in terms of GDPR. Ultimately, we, from our perspective, the most we might be able to identify of an individual really is a hand if it's going over the scanner or something to that degree. Deliberately, we don't want anything that's actually personally identifiable. It's quite a big piece.
Okay, so that was my other question. So you're pointing the camera at a specific area so that you're not getting involved.
The objects, correct. Yeah. So whatever, where your hand will scan the object previously. So rather than scanning, you're just showing the object.
Yeah. That's cool, because that's one of the self-service shopping thing is, you sit and scan your barcode, and then you put it on the scale, then it doesn't recognize the weight, and
it's about 12 seconds to do one banana pence item. It doesn't make any sense, let alone everything else, right?
Yeah. And so that biometric thing we did used to scan 4 fingers and used to identify you.
Mhm.
And they would use any camera as long as HD. What would be interesting with what you're doing is you could authenticate the person to do their payment as well, using the same sort of concept. So you could then also do the age verification thing, which is also a pain. Because, you've just bought your Panados and now they have to come and grab, check that you're old enough to buy painkillers.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. That's an interest. That's actually, I see where you're going with that. The age side is very interesting. I think payments is typically a very hard industry to break into. The NCRs and the POS guys of the world. That's an area they are always very, ultimately, rightly so, ring fenced. So yeah, we're not having yet traversed into the payment side of things. That being said, we're obviously all over transactional data because we have to be. But yeah, the payment side certainly is something that would be of interest.
well, I mean, you don't have to own the payments thing, but you could do the authentication for them.
Yeah, exactly.
Or some part of the biometric validate, or part of the factor of authentication. That would be interesting. Yeah, we the startup that we're enrolled in now is a payment platform. Well, I've forgotten the new tagline, which is very bad of me because I've only heard it yesterday. But we basically build the UIs.
That's the new tagline.
That's exactly, exactly. I'll get in trouble. But basically, we build the UIs on top of all the APIs. So you can build your app, your fintech app, using our platform to deliver your solution, and then all the APIs sit behind, what we've already built for you. And I think that's not for what I've seen in the market, it's a nice place to be. Very much in this bring your own app direction. I think some things have gone still where people want to build their own solution and deliver it. I'm thinking about, for example, kids at school, just keeping count of them with using computer vision, for attendance records, for, safety situations, that sort of stuff. Again, you can't be looking at faces, but if you could recognize uniforms, size, body shape, that could be useful in at least keeping count and track of certain populace, I guess.
That's exactly what China has been using, right, in their educational systems, computer vision at scale across primary and secondary schools. And the point they're doing it is ultimately exactly measuring attendance, measuring engagement, looking at facial features as to emotional sets, whether happy, sad, so on and so forth, but also to start applying prescriptive education. So it's exactly a use case there that I know is being employed by the Chinese state. And I think is actually, whilst it can feel a little bit minority report, I think prescriptive education is tailored education would be a huge benefit for any country. I think just right now the potential, not politics, but framing around it can feel a little bit invasive.
So when you say prescriptive, do you mean tailored to the individual, or do you mean?
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I think it has to go that way. I think this factory mindset of everyone must learn maths. Okay, actually, everyone must learn maths. Everyone must learn geography. Everyone must learn history. Everyone must learn biology. And these things, I don't think that necessarily helps anybody, other than to memorize things. That's probably the only skill you learn.
Agreed.
But
look, and all I think it does there is forcing you to learn something you're not inherently or innately capable in. It just makes you have confidence issues. Right? Like,
yeah,
I'm not a creative. I'm not a wordsmith. English is my weakest subject. I saw it at school. And by being forced to do English all the way through to whatever, 18, 19, 20, I just felt like I sucked in languages. And it's, whereas as I said, I'm a mathematician and that was always my thing. So I think, I would have been benefited more by spending probably more of my education in the mathy field.
Although you say that, I remember we had a subject in engineering called communication for engineers. That was the subject. And I went to Afrikaans University. So you have to understand, big Afrikaans guys who don't speak English very well, now having to go and do a course for an hour every week on communications in English because they had to be able to speak to other people. And the resistance was there because, one, it was not so much, it was all the soft skills that we don't talk about soft skills anymore. Those were the soft skills you had to have, like how to disagree with somebody, how to have conflict, how to be accountable, and also all that kind of stuff. And it was fascinating because for a lot of these guys, the default language wasn't English, so it was hard for them to do English. But the other thing was they couldn't get across because Afrikaans is quite a descriptive language, and English is actually quite not a descriptive language, funnily enough. And I can't give you examples because they've all been Afrikaans, but I learned maths in Afrikaans, and it was actually easier to learn maths in Afrikaans than it was to learn in English. Because like integration, there isn't actually a word for integration in Afrikaans. So you have to explain it as change in area of a shape. That's basically how you have to explain it. And these guys had to now convert from their home language, their mother tongue, to English, and then had to explain stuff. And it was fascinating to watch how over 6 months how this developed and how they actually did get those skills, because obviously they had to get them, but also how they were able to convey complex things that they struggled with to begin with, but all of a sudden became almost salesy. And how many of these guys actually moved into sales and marketing, not engineering in the end of it, because they actually realized they actually enjoyed communicating. But because they'd grown up and been clever and mathematical and analytical, they'd stayed in that way. Like, you will be an engineer, you'll go build bridges, you'll go build machinery. And then they realized that they actually found the spark by having the opportunity to go that way. It's just a fascinating, as you were saying, I think I was just connecting the dots and like going, no, that's actually something I hadn't really considered, that you need to have that prescribed thing, but also to get people out of their comfort zone. Anyway, it's been great chatting with you. We're almost on the hour. So do you want people to reach out to you? Do you want to check out your companies? I mean, what's the best thing to do following this?
Absolutely. Yeah, I'd say I'm very active on LinkedIn as well, and the Mitchell Goldman. Please do check out the companies if there's any of interest to explore. As I said, I've got my fingers in quite a few different pies these days, so always up for having conversations where it's helpful and relevant. But yeah, Ryan, thank you very, very much for having me. Really enjoyed this today, and yeah, please do reach out if it can be helpful.
No, it's been great chatting with you, and I look forward to having that catch up at some point, and we could share some of those stories.
Some of the redacted stories, exactly.
Yeah, good.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. Heather Bicknell is our producer and editor. Thank you, Heather, for your hard work on this episode. Please subscribe to the series and rate us on iTunes or the Google Play Store. Follow us on Twitter at the DWW Podcast. The show notes and transcripts will be available on the website www.digitalworkspace.works. Please also visit our website www.digitalworkspace.works and subscribe to our newsletter. And lastly, if you found this episode useful, please share with your friends or colleagues.